oftentimes tell parents when they ask me what they can do, I said, normalize that boys are as equally hard and soft as girls or as non-gender conforming. It's not a gender identity. It's a human capacity and need.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the biggest message. It's not, I'm going to repeat it because we're not getting that. It is not a gender identity. It's not about being masculine or feminine. It's about being human and valuing thinking and feeling, self and other, autonomy and connectedness, stoicism and vulnerability. I mean, I could do them.
We are thrilled to have Dr. Niobe Way, who's an internationally recognized professor of developmental psychology at NYU, as well as the founder of the Project for the Advancement of Our Common Humanity and the director of the Science of Human Connection Lab. She is also Principal Investigator of the Listening Project, which has been funded by the Spencer Foundation, the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Dr. Way has authored or co-authored over 100 journal articles and books, including Deep Secrets, Boys' Friendships and the Crisis of Connection, and Rebels with a Cause, Reimagining Boys, Ourselves, and Our Culture. Her book, Deep Secrets, was the inspiration for the movie Close, which won the Grand Prix Award at Cannes Film Festival and was nominated for an Oscar for Best Foreign Film. Dr. Way was the president of the Society for Research on Adolescence and received her BA from UC Berkeley, her doctorate in Human Development and Psychology from Harvard School of Education, and was an NIMH postdoc fellow in the psychology department at Yale.
Yeah, that's
me.
me.
We are so excited to have you.
Yeah.
Anything else we should let the audience know before we kick it off in the conversation about you?
So I'm in the midst of building a couple things at the moment, which we can talk about as we move along, which is sort of the solutions, not just the problem, but what do we do? I'm in the midst of building something called the Social Health Institute. It's going to be based, most likely, I can't give the details, but it's going to be based in California. But it's training in my framework and method of listening with curiosity to CEOs and students and professionals around the world. And the second thing is I'm building a Center for Youth and Connection by Design Technology, which is going to hopefully reimagine digital technology and AI policy to focus on human-to-human connection. And we are doing that at a university, and we're negotiating which university right now, right this second.
Cool.
But what I think your listeners would be interested in is how I'm taking the work and turning it into action, not just in schools, which I've been doing for a decade, but changing our technology to address actually what we've learned from young people for close to a century at this point.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And it's incredibly relevant. And I totally resonate with the moving discussion from the problems to solutions.
Yeah.
There's often stalls out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of discussion about what the problem is, and my critique of oftentimes our discussions, and we can get into it, is that the problem is oftentimes not based on what we learn from the people who are struggling. So my work is really rooted in, I've been listening to teenagers since 1987. That's a long time. Mm-hmm. And my recent books have been focused on what we learn from boys and young men. And oftentimes the discussion about boys and men is about people's ideas about what's wrong or why we think they're struggling. And so a lot of the big known names in this field are actually not coming from researchers. They're coming from people with opinions. And I'm not saying, I'll say this ahead of time of our interview, I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with everything they're saying, but I want what we know to be based in what they tell us directly, boys and young men tell us directly about the problem, but also the solution. They offer a solution. It's in what they're sharing with us. Mm-hmm. And so to me, underscoring the problem from the perspective of the boys and young men, and then showing how it's not just relevant to boys and young men, it's relevant to all of us, regardless of our identities. And then the solutions to help all of us deal with what I call in my books the crisis of connection and building a more just and humane society. But boys teach us about that, which is kind of amazing, right? That they don't just teach us the problem, they teach us the solution. And so I look forward to having this conversation today.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that dissonance between what boys and men are saying and then what people are hearing. Yeah. Because that was one of the things I latched onto in reading Deep Secrets was that it seemed like this, especially this younger generation was telling people who asked pretty directly, like, I do value intimate friendships and I want these. Yeah. So what's what is the disconnect between what people are hearing them say
Yeah.
and what they're actually saying?
Well, it's funny. I just got the goosebumps when you were talking because it's it strikes at the heart of my struggle and my work since 1988, when I first really started to listen to young people. Because in 1988, I promise you this is relevant. In 1988, my disconnect was what I was learning in graduate school about adolescence, and what I was hearing from adolescents themselves that had nothing to do with it. So literally nothing. So the adolescents, when I was working in schools and public schools in Boston in the late 1980s, was all about boys talking about their desire for friendships, their struggle to find friendships. Girls were talking about the same thing. There was a lot of discussion about friendships, wanting to find someone who they could trust, and et cetera, from boys and girls. And yet, when I went into my graduate level classes taking adolescent development, you'd learn about high-risk behavior. You'd learn about peer pressure with doing bad behavior. If you studied or were interested in kids of color or poor working class kids, it was all about gang behavior and getting pregnant early. I mean, it was literally all pathology. Not just kids of color, but actually all adolescents was, about acting out behavior, what was called at that time high-risk behavior. When I went to the high schools, public high schools in Boston, they were telling a totally different story. They were talking about their desire for close relationships and why they found it hard to find them. And their language didn't have gender differences in them. Girls and boys, there wasn't a non-gender binary version in the 80s, but I'm sure it would have been the same thing. They all sounded the same. They all sounded human. They all sounded just like they want, and this is what comes into my research that I became fascinated by is that disconnect with how we represented teenagers and what they're actually saying. So then I started to listen to boys and girls and people with different identities, Black, white, Asian. We do studies in China too. And I started listening to young people around the world. And I realized that the boys and men in particular were telling a story we were not listening to. And so that's really what led to Deep Secrets and eventually Rebels with a Cause, because I realized we were actually starting to a little bit listen to girls in the way they talked about their struggle to hold on to what they know and speak truth to power, and how they begin to oftentimes silence themselves as they get older. And we were paying attention to the silencing of girls and women in the late 90s. I don't know if you're too young for this, but in the late 90s, we started paying attention to sort of raising girls' voices and making sure that they were being listened to. We never fully succeeded, given we still haven't had a woman president. But the point is, we started paying attention to what they were sharing. We were not doing the same with boys and young men. We were just not listening to what they were saying. And the reason is, it's really interesting because, and I write about this in Rebels with a Cause, this is really, what I'm about to say is research findings. It's not my opinion. It's really literally what they show us. So they reveal 4 patterns, and in the 4 patterns, overarching patterns, they reveal why we've had such a hard time hearing boys. And I'll go through quickly the 4 patterns. And these are hundreds of boys that I follow. And the key part is I follow them over time. So if I just followed them at one time point, if I was just a journalist and just interviewed 100 boys, I would never have heard the themes that I do.
Right.
Because the point is the themes that you hear when they're 13 and 14 is totally different than what you hear when they're 18 and 19. And then when you interview the same kid, so you hear their voice shift from an emotional, expressive, beautiful, tender voice at 12, 13 to a sort of covered over, it doesn't matter, I'm fine, it's all good, but a clear sense of pain in their voice at 17 and 18, or sometimes just an angry voice. Why are you asking me that question about friendships? I'm not gay, right? When they began to hear that different voice, it's the same kid. So that revealed something, right? It revealed that we weren't born, essentially, as I always say, sort of tongue-in-cheek. Boys and men who act like assholes weren't born assholes. You know what I mean? Like they came into the world just like everybody else with this remarkable relational and emotional intelligence. So I'll walk through the 4 findings very quickly. The first finding, and these are all, at this point, thousands of boys, around the world. So it's but these are the 4 themes. The first theme was just the open expression of wanting friendships, wanting emotionally intimate friendships they could share their deep secrets with, they could trust, sounding like girls. But what I argue is it's not like girls, just a human desire for connected and same-sex connection, not sexual, but platonic, deep emotional connection. And boys at 12, 13, 14, 15 sometimes were just so explicit. You just asked them the question. It wasn't like we had to work to get that answer. You just said, tell me about your friendships. That was our question. Tell me about your friendships. And then they would say, well, sometimes they had close friendships and they'd talk about why they were close. And if you read Deep Secrets, which I know you did, you get those gorgeous quotes. I can't live without him. He's my,
I
it's
go
like,
crazy.
yeah, I go crazy. He's like my teddy bear I can hold on to when
I
I'm
love
feeling
my
bad.
friends.
I love my friends. I mean, you hear this stunning language. And my team and I were just blown away because their language was just so emotional, and you heard it from Black kids, from Latino kids, from white kids, from Asian kids, all sorts of racial and ethnic backgrounds, all sorts of social classes, not just from the middle class kids. In fact, I would argue the working class kids, that's another finding. The working class kids actually were more expressive emotionally in terms of what they, wanted with their friendships, and if they had them, why they were so close to these kids. So two embedded findings in the first finding. They wanted these friendships, but this was sort of part of the same finding. So I make it the same finding. They had they spoke the language of relationships. They said things like, sometimes I'll be pissed, but it's not really that I'm pissed at you. It's really that you hurt my feelings, and I feel afraid. And so 13-year-old boys were saying this. Like, sometimes I pose as if it's one thing, but it's really not that thing, or they'll say, how you talk to another guy and the other guy will say, it's okay. This is a quote. It's okay, but it's really not. This is them talking to me about relationships. So realizing their relational intelligence, that they sounded like girls, what we've deemed feminine, they didn't sound feminine. They sounded like humans talking, being incredibly intelligent. So that was the first finding. The second finding was a really important one in the mental health space. And they said this directly. If I didn't have a best friend or someone I could share my thoughts to, I would feel all alone and I would want to kill myself. Or I would feel all alone and be depressed and want to kill myself. So they were directly making the link between what I'm calling now social health, the health of your relationships, and mental health. And the fact that we then became obviously having a mental health revolution in terms of our paying attention to mental health is obviously positive. But the missing part, according to Boys and Young Men, is, hey, look at the predictor of mental health problems. If you just treat mental health with medication and therapy, which I'm an advocate of both in certain circumstances, right? I mean, it's a good thing. I'm not critiquing it. But it can't only be that if its root is poor social health that leads to mental health. So it means that if we're treating mental health, we have to be thinking, for many people, not necessarily all people, but for many people, it's rooted in a sense of loneliness, a sense of disconnection from others, a disconnection from the self, right? All those kinds of things that lead to social health. Social health includes yourself too, right? It's the other and yourself. And that it leads to mental health. So that's the second finding, okay? The third finding was the differences that you heard from early to late adolescence. So from early adolescence, you heard this emotional voice, this tender voice, this open voice, this openly vulnerable voice. By the time they were 15, 16, and 17, and just because I'm a scientist, so I want to be very precise. I'm not saying all the boys sounded like this. I'm not saying there wasn't variation, tremendous variation. But essentially over half of the boys, as they became, late adolescence, middle to late adolescence, their voice changed. And sometimes it was very subtle, from the literally moving from the emotional voice to, it doesn't matter, it's okay, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. But they sort of said that too many times, and they'd say, well, I don't really have close friends anymore, but it's all good, I'm fine, I don't need friends. I mean, that kind of subtle. Sometimes boys were very explicit that they've given up, they can't find somebody that they can feel close to, and they basically stop looking for one anymore. And then some kids would then a sort of angry voice, like, you can't trust anybody, it's all fucked up, basically you had variation. And some kids definitely were able to hold on, boys in particular, were able to hold on to their friendships, and I can talk about that at a later point. So there's definitely was a group of young men, I've always had young men in my samples that actually hold on to their friendship. So the question is, for those boys, what do they have in their lives that others don't? And I'll be able to answer that question. So that's the third finding, right? The sort of what I call the crisis of connection that happens in adolescence. As boys go through adolescence, they feel pressure, to disconnect from their friendships in the name of, and that's my fourth and final theme, in the name of manhood, right? Being a man and disconnecting from your emotional needs. but also this is the kicker and what I have to offer as a developmental psychologist, but also in the name of maturity. So we think manhood and maturity mean the same thing, which is stunning if you think about it, right? So that manning up, being tough, being stoic, not needing other people, we see as not only an element of manhood, but of maturity. So in fact, our notion of manning up affects everybody, right? Everybody, because it's how we define maturity, about being self-sufficient, independent, right? Being able to do things on your own. When all adults know that maturity should entail the ability to be mutually connected to each other. That should be a critical element, as important as independence, not more important, not less important, equally important. That our capacity to care for another person should be part of how we define maturity, and obviously how we define manhood, womanhood, adulthood. But we live in a culture that somehow thinks manhood and maturity is just, and this is the big finding for the fourth theme, what I call in Rebels with a Cause, the hard sides of ourselves. What we've deemed stereotypically masculine, we value that more than the stereotypically soft sides. And by hard sides, I mean thinking, autonomy, independence. These are good things, right? These are good things. The soft side are also good things. Sensitivity, right? Emotional expression, vulnerability, all your soft skills that you need. And this is the big kicker. This is what we show us. You need those soft skills to have relationships, right? But if you only value the hard skills and not the soft skills, and you only value and you emphasize that even more with boys and men than girls and women, it means that boys and men are going to have a harder time having close relationships than girls and women, for the very simple reason that we only value their hard sides. And with women, I would say, who are feeling now more increasingly wanting to man up too, because we're very, very, I call it boy culture in my book, boy in quotation, meaning it's a stereotypic boy who only has a hard side. It's not a real boy.
Right.
If you live in boy culture, and again, it's boy in quotation, meaning it's not a real boy, it's boy, that's going to hurt everybody. But it's going to hurt boys and men in particular, because that's going to say to be a man and to be mature, you have to cover over your soft side, or we even sometimes consider it lame. So it's not even just covering over it, but don't be weak, don't be lame by being sensitive. And evidence of our privileging of the hard over the soft is everywhere. We value the hard sciences over the soft sciences, thinking over feeling, right? Emotional regulation over emotional sensitivity. Think about it. An entire country that focuses on emotional regulation in schools, nothing that focuses on emotional sensitivity. And then we wonder why we're having a hard time getting along, right? So boys show us not only why they suffer, right? A boy culture, right? Raising them to go against their nature. And I would say at this point, we're all raising our children to go against their nature by not valuing their soft sides, only valuing their hard sides, their interest in STEM fields and not in humanities and poetry and the arts and theater and all those kinds of things. So that causes tremendous suffering. And why does it lead to problems? Suicide, for example, mass violence. Those are stories in my Rebels with a Cause book. It's very simple. If you grow up in a culture, I'll repeat it again, this is what we learned from boys. If you grow up in boy culture, right, that only values half of your humanity and sees the other half as lame and weak and pathetic and in a homophobic way, girly and gay, right, you're not going to be a healthy person when you grow up, right? Because you need both sides of your humanity to be a full person. So if you're only valued for the parts of yourself that can think and be independent and be self-sufficient, but not for your capacity to be sensitive and caring and loving and right and generous with another person, you're going to suffer. And basically, suicide, and you see it in the suicide notes, and mass violence. I'm not equating them; they're totally different. But I'm just saying, you see those themes that they don't feel seen, right, in their whole selves, right, valuing their whole selves, and they're upset with mass shooters. They're upset that they feel like, can I swear on the show?
Yeah.
That nobody gives a fuck, so that they're suffering because almost all of them have been bullied. Almost all mass shooters have been bullied. That nobody gives a fuck that they're suffering. And then they get labeled as loners and as all these things they do before they commit their crime. I'm not apologizing for mass shooters. I'm just saying we're not going to be able to stop the violence of mass shooting until we recognize the problem is not the kid. It is the kid, but it's not only the kid. It's an entire culture in which we swim in, that only values this one side of ourselves when we're naturally born, right? That's what we learn from 12-year-olds. We're naturally born with this amazing capacity to care for each other, amazing capacity, and to read each other's psychology. You hear that from 4-year-olds. They're reading psychology of their parents. I mean, we're born wickedly relationally and emotionally and cognitively intelligent. And then we smack it out of our kids by making them just value a stereotype of a boy, and then grow up in a culture that doesn't care, doesn't cooperate, and isn't curious about each other, which is one of the things that we'll talk about when we talk about the solutions. So that was a very long-winded response, but that sort of gives you the sense of the scope of both books, Deep Secrets and Rebels with a Cause.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. That is a gold mine, and just so many lessons in there that I love. Like, listen to your 12-year-old and recognize the power in your 12, 13-year-old to be seeking out these really complicated, fulfilling relationships. So I think even just recognizing that is possible in young boys is such a revelation.
And that's what I really want to underscore that. And thank you for picking that up from what I said, because it gave me the goosebumps again. Because that's really the message. It's people say, well, you have a really depressing message. And I'll say, no. I have the most optimistic message I could ever give you, because what 12 and 13 and 14-year-old boys show us, and now I'm focused on 4-year-old kids, by the way, and 4-year-olds show us, is that we are born with the capacity to solve our own problems, right? And so we don't have to teach it. We don't have to teach it. We just have to nourish it, so that you can't get more optimistic than that. We don't have to throw a ton of money into new interventions to teach social skills, to boys. No, we just have to, from the very beginning of life, at our homes and our schools, we have to nourish it. We have to value it. We have to value thinking and feeling, the self and other, caring and cooperation, as well as competition. Competition is a beautiful thing too. And, sometimes you can't be caring, or you have to privilege your own self-preservation over somebody else. That's a good thing, that we can actually know how to self-care and not always privilege the other, right? I mean, both sides are stereotypically masculine and feminine. And this is the thing I have against a lot of people that either talk about toxic masculinity or they talk about let's celebrate masculinity. Let's get away from the conversation about masculinity. We've masculinized, right? We've made masculine something that's not masculine. It's human. To be stoic is human. It's a beautiful human capacity, that when you're suffering, if you were suffering right now and crying to me, I would tap into my natural capacity to be stoic. Because if I started to cry when you cried, that wouldn't feel very supportive to you. And I know intuitively, even as a 4-year-old, that if I start crying when you're crying, it's not helpful. What I need to do is be super stoic and say, tell me about why you're crying. Tell me what makes you sad. And I have to not, right, hold it together. So our stereotypically masculine sides are very valuable, but so too are stereotypically feminine sides. It's not gendered. Thinking and feeling are not gendered. And I want to say this, that is not an opinion. That is what boys and young men in my research over 40 years have underscored, right? That thinking and feeling is not gendered. So the boy who famously said, I quote it a lot, but I've heard it many, many times, but it's a great quote, is he says, it might be nice to be a girl because then I wouldn't have to be emotionless. And I always repeat that quote because I've gotten many times in different forms from boys for 30 years. I always repeat the quote to the audience. And I say, that is boy culture. It might be nice to be a girl because then I wouldn't have to be emotionless. And, if a sister from another planet came down and landed on this planet and said, we have made only girls have emotions, right? And only boys have thinking, right? Have cognition. She would say, are you crazy? And that's what we're doing. We're crazy. And kids, young boys and young men, expose the craziness, by saying things like, it might be nice to be a girl, and to me, it's deep.
Yeah.
So, what I'm sort of arguing with people and I'll say his name because it's fine, Richard Reeves, who gets a lot of attention on boys and men with the recent piece that was in the New York Times included. And it's not that all he says is sort of I disagree with. It's really not that. Some of it I do. But I think his views would be very different if he listened to boys and young men. I think he would not be so stuck on certain gender differences if he actually listened to 4-year-olds. If he actually listened to 8-year-old boys, 4-year-old boys, 12-year-old boys, I think his views would completely change. And so if he really read Deep Secrets and Rebels of the Cause, I think his views would change. Because how can they not change? Because boys are, and to go back to your original question, by the way, why do we insist on boy culture when we know it's not a real boy intuitively? And I would say because we don't listen to young people, and so we think our stereotypes are real. We think they're biological. We think you're naturally, I'm being tongue in cheek, but you're naturally an asshole and I'm naturally caring. And the reality is that we both have the potential to be assholes, definitely, and we both have the potential to be caring. So what are you going to nurture? What are you going to nurture, right? The assholeness or the caring? And the reality is we have the option to nurture the caring. And what we're now doing, and I'm going to say, this is serious, it's not tongue in cheek, we are encouraging the asshole. So then we produce assholes, right? Men and women, by the way.
Yeah, because it's especially in the quote about it'd be nice to be a girl, so then I want to be emotionless. Really highlights the pain in that statement, and it makes it incredibly obvious. Like, here's a person with all the capacity and skills for those intimate, connected relationships, and the need for those to be a healthy person.
Yeah.
And is not able to access them because that person is experiencing the system that's not rewarding it.
Yeah.
Which is why I have a question about, I love the concepts that you brought up about social health, which is a new term for me, but makes so much sense as like the missing link for driving mental health in a way that's sustainable. Does it fit into a framework where with stronger social health, you see greater rewards that are measurable in a way that can like fit into the existing system and rewards? Is that in terms of like marketing the shift? Do you see it like that?
So this is the thing. If you start from a place, so you have to start from a different place, right? Then we're starting. If you think that social health isn't even valuable, we don't even know what the concept is, and it's all about the me, which is what we do. So everything's about the me. Mental health, physical health is all about our biology and treating it individually. So you have to start from a place that we're social animals, and we've known that from neuroscience and developmental science for a century. We are deeply, I'm going to repeat this because we have to start from this place. We are deeply social animals. We need each other to survive. Fundamentally, right? We're born in relationship. I mean, all of this comes from 100 years of developmental science in my field. So if you start from a place that we're social animals, right? Not that we're autonomous robots, right? Then you immediately know that we naturally have the capacity to be caring. I'm defining social for a new book I'm writing for Harvard. Actually, I'm going to give the title, Our Social Nature in an Antisocial Culture, a 5-part story. And that's a good title to summarize where I'm at right now. So if you start from a notion that we are social animals, biologically, right? Biologically, we have a potential to be assholes, right? We do. But we have the potential to be deeply social and caring. So I'm defining social as caring, cooperative, and curious. We see that in the first 5 years of life. We see lots of acts of caring for and about each other, their teacher, their mommy and daddy, their siblings, tons of that. We see lots of examples of cooperation, not just teacher-imposed cooperation, but natural cooperation on the playground. You see it all the time. And you see gazillion examples of curiosity, not just intellectual, why does the moon look, you get bright, but actually interpersonal curiosity. Questions that I get from 4-year-olds when I walk into a 4-year classroom. I usually wear a necklace. I'm not wearing it today. But they will say, why do you wear that necklace all the time? What's your mother's first name? Why am I, a little boy once said that I was connected to my family and he knew I was going through a hard time. He said, why do you smile when you're feeling sad? Like, why do you fake an emotion? I mean, they ask genius questions, right? Just beautiful, beautiful questions. Another little boy actually said, Mommy, are you yelling at me because your mama yelled at you? I mean, 4 years old? Like, are you effing kidding me? Right? So we're born with this completely for care, cooperation, and curiosity. If we're born with it, then that means we have to value it because it's so critical. So rather than saying starting from social health, I would say, no, you start from that we're social animals and we naturally have these skills. So then the question has to be changed, is how do we nourish our social nature, right? And create a pro-social culture, right? That nourishes our nature rather than gets in the way. So if you start from how do we promote social health, we don't know how to get there because we're in an antisocial culture. So how do you promote social health in an antisocial culture? The answer is you can't, because nobody even values social health. And it's antisocial, it's anti-we, it's all me, 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 it's all me. So you have to start from we're social animals, and that's empirically driven, it's not an opinion. It's in the research. It's in the primatology research too, non-human primates, right? It's the same thing. We're social animals, and we have natural capacities, natural social skills to promote social health, mental health, physical health, right? All those things. We have natural capacities. So then the question becomes simply, how do you promote it? How do you promote care, cooperation, and curiosity in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces? And that's easy because we're all starving for it. We're all starving to be listened to, curiosity. We're all starving to work together in a beautiful way. We're all starving for people to care about us. And we all have the natural capacity to care about others. So you tap into the hunger when you switch the paradigm, right? Starting from we're social animals rather than we're naturally basically brutal, horrible, and selfish. It changes everything. So then it becomes how do you create a pro-social culture? And that is what my new book is about, and that's what I'm doing with the Social Health Institute and the Center for Youth and Connection by Design Technology, because I'm trying to get us to start from a new place, drawing from the science of human connection, which includes my research, but it's not only my research, it's a whole century of research. So that's the goal now. How do you create a pro-social culture? And you do it by starting from a different place initially, and then you create amazing things via online and offline, right, to promote what we're doing right now, right? Talking to each other, having a deep conversation, offering opportunities for mutual curiosity, mutual caring, valuing our soft disciplines too, valuing teaching, valuing arts, music, right? If we valued those college majors, we wouldn't have boys struggling, right, to stay in college because we only value math and science at this point. And so if we started to value half of our humanity and also everything associated with the soft, we would get those beautiful 12-year-old boys back,
Yeah. I mean, it's such a my question is, it's such a knee-jerk reaction to its focus on like the symptoms. So I appreciate you bringing
Exactly. Well, that's what we do as a culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's what is it called? Tertiary prevention, right? Not primary prevention.
Yeah.
So we focus on, oh, you're depressed. Okay, here's what you should do, rather than asking the question. I mean, this is what even mass shooters draw attention to. We never say, kids draw attention to this. When we had the Connecticut mass shooter, I think this was about 10, 15 years ago. And I remember we're going to a class of 12-year-olds, and I said, why did this kid kill all these people? And they said, because he was crazy. And I said, yeah, but what made him crazy? And 3 kids said in unison, loneliness. 12-year-old kids. They just said loneliness. And I said, how does loneliness relate to violence? And they told me literally exactly how it relates. They said, because you think nobody cares about you, and you think and that you're all alone, and you're going to be all alone the rest of your life, and it makes you angry. And they told stories about being excluded and how it makes you angry. And they said, if it was happening all the time and nobody was helping me, I too may feel like I want to be violent. And they talked about one little boy, he talked about being angry at his sister for excluding her and taking the Barbie doll head off her Barbie and feeling so guilty about it. But he said, I did it. He's expressing this in front of the whole class.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I did it because I was so mad at my sister, and then I felt bad because it was her favorite Barbie doll. But I just thought, they know what's going on. They know what's going on. And yet we somehow, when someone commits violence, we just say, well, we don't know why he committed the violence, but he must have been, mentally ill. Well, of course he was mentally ill. What caused the mental illness? What provoked it? We used to, back in the 70s, and definitely before you were born, we used to have a theory about schizophrenia, that schizophrenia was just, do you know this about mental health? That schizophrenia was just a realistic response to an insane world, and that actually normal people were actually, disconnected enough to not be schizophrenic. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That in a world where you're only valuing one side of yourself and you're being trained to be a robot, basically, that schizophrenia was like an expression of rejection of what is normal.
Mm.
I'm not saying I advocate for that definition of schizophrenia, but I'm just saying that was an interesting moment where people were recognizing the craziness of the context.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
We're not recognizing the craziness of the context. We think it's Trump supporters, or we think it's immigrants, or we think it's people of color, or women, or men, or we're all blaming ourselves, or no, we're not blaming ourselves. Actually, we're blaming each other, and not recognizing it's all of us to different degrees, but it's all of us participating in boy culture, and not seeing that we are causing our own problems and that we can solve them naturally.
Yeah. Are there examples you've seen either around the world or maybe even anecdotally in organizations or communities in America that do emphasize the pro-social roots?
Yeah, there's a fair amount. And in the new book for Harvard, I'm describing like 8 of them, and a place like Habitat for Humanity, that, do you know what it is? Sort of where people come together and they build houses for people who don't have homes. And Jimmy Carter was a part of that for a long time. The Special Olympics, very inclusive, very cooperative, very caring, bringing people who are disabled together with people who don't have various kind of disabilities. So there's lots of organizations that are sort of bridging people divides through care, cooperation, and curiosity about the other. In our own work, and also I want to mention dance organizations are also key in this, because we oftentimes think, care, cooperation, and curiosity is all sort of cognitive, but actually the arts and dance is a natural way where we, care, cooperate, and are curious about each other and work through movement. So there's a company in San Francisco called Oberlin Dance Company, ODC San Francisco, and their whole theme is around care, cooperation, and curiosity, but through movement. So I think there's lots of possibilities. In our own work, we've been in schools for the past 10 years. That's what was funded by Chan-Zuckerberg and Spencer, called the Listening Project, and it's now called the Listening with Curiosity Project, where we have a 26-lesson curriculum of training kids in the framework of why we're having a crisis of connection and how there's a culture and nature clash. We train kids in that framework. That's why they're lonely, right? That's why they're suffering, is their culture is clashing with their nature. And how do we bring back your nature, your beautiful social nature? And we teach them a method. There's 9 practices. It's in Rebels with a Cause, laying out the 9 practices, what I call relational intelligence. And we've been training it for years and evaluating it, because I'm a researcher, and finding huge impact on the impact it has on social emotional well-being, social emotional skills, and also academic engagement, because it's all connected. And also, beautifully enough, around a sense of a common humanity. It improves people's sense of a common humanity, seeing each other in difference, right? And so we've had that for about 10 years, these incredibly powerful findings. And now we're taking the method, we're gamifying it, we're turning it into an app called Agape, which means love of humans. And it's the last year we've been co-designing it with teenagers, 27 teenagers, and we're about to come out with an MVP for the app in October.
Congrats.
And I want all your listeners to check it out.
Please, yeah.
And it's about bridging divides and fostering friendships, nurturing the skills of relational intelligence, but we're gamifying it a little bit like Duolingo. So it's learning a language. So we're nurturing your capacity to care, cooperation, and be curious about each other through a game.
Yep.
Right. And so we want people to check it out. It's called Agapi, Agapi.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said on the what gets rewarded and what doesn't, is often resources like that, like a clinically backed, well-studied, well-designed app product with engineers and research going into it isn't designated for fields like that, and it's
Yeah.
just completely ignored.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, it's also, so this sounds a little tangential, but it's not tangential. So what's also the thing is sometimes care, cooperation, and curiosity is a little bit what you just said, but is right in front of you and you just don't see it. So, for example, in my pre-K classroom that I've been watching pre-K kids for the last semester. And what the teacher confessed to me, which was interesting, she said, Niobe, it's so interesting because you are so tuned to the multiple instances of care, cooperation, and curiosity throughout the day. And she said, I don't see it. I just see who are the kids misbehaving, who are the kids behaving and eating their lunch and doing the work. And she said, I focus on the kids that I have to deal with. And she said, I'm not even seeing it. Like, you are drawing attention to what they're doing that's very pro-social, and I don't even see it. And I think that's true with all of us. I think we are surrounded by people being caring, cooperative, and curious about each other, and we don't even see it. We don't even hear it. We don't, we're not expecting it, right? Remember that first question you asked me? We don't expect it, so we don't hear it. And so to me, in some ways, the solution is not only figuring out how to engage in this, but notice it. See it, name it, say, hey, that was super caring of you. Thank you so much. When someone comes up in a cafe and does something nice to me, like they'll just do something that's obviously being sensitive, like they'll lower their voice when they're on their silly phone and I'm sitting there working and they get on their phone and they're talking loudly and then they'll look over at me and go, oh, sorry, and then they'll start whispering. And I'll say, when they get off, I'll say, thank you so much. That was super sensitive of you. I really appreciate that you did that. And they'll go like, oh, thanks. And I'm thinking like, just do that. When someone does something nice, don't just say thank you. Make a point of it. Just say, wow, that was super sensitive of you. Like that was really nice. And people love it. They love to get the acknowledgement of being a nice person. So a lot of it is not just that the world is miserable and we're all screwed up, but actually that we're doing some beautiful things with each other, lots of programs, but also lots of day-to-day interactions that are beautiful, tender. New Yorkers being incredibly nice to tourists. It just happens all the time. Someone doing something, opening the door for you or doing something gentle. I walked into a cafe the other day and the guy behind, who's the barrister, how do you say that? Barista. So you can fix it on the thing. Barista. So the barista was who I know very well. I was sort of sitting there working. He just came over and gave me a free cup of coffee. He said, I thought maybe you wanted another cup. And I was like, oh my God, that's so nice. He goes, oh, what? You just look like maybe you need another cup of coffee.
Super sweet, yeah.
It's just so sweet. And I think we think just saying, oh, thanks is enough. No. In an antisocial culture, you need to really recognize it.
Yeah.
And when your 5-year-old, by the way, I'm not going to speak to parents now. When your 5-year-old asks that stunning question, the beautiful question, you have to say, wow, that's a super interesting question. I don't know the answer. This is what I think the answer is, but I really don't know the answer. What do you think? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, acknowledge the curiosity, engage them. Don't just say, we don't have time to answer that question, or I don't know, when they ask those impossible questions. Like, engage their curiosity.
And I guess I'm thinking about like the like individual versus social community aspect, where, tell me if you agree with this, where there's recognizing like, oh, wow, my child just asked a brilliant question. Yeah. And then seeing it in other people's kids.
Totally. Oh, you're a great interviewer.
That probably doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And so that's what you have. In the sense that what our project does, Listen with Curiosity, really tries to nurture your curiosity in everybody, not just who you love. And so the notion is that, at this point, since I've been teaching it for ages, I'm very much like this. So I will hear it on the street and I will immediately tell the person. I hear it and then I acknowledge it. And even with a parent, I'll hear a parent and a child, and the child will ask a question. The parent will sort of say, ignore it. And I'll say, hey, that was a great question. I wonder what the answer is. The parent will sort of look at me startled, and I'll say, it was just a great question. Like, it's an interesting thing to think about what your child just asked. And I don't do it in a hostile way. I do it in a loving way. But my point is, you're absolutely right. When it's just about our children, then it's actually just serving. It's not serving the same function. When it's about getting your child to be super fascinated by a question, and then hopefully when his peer has a question that he finds interesting or she finds interesting, right, they'll say, that's interesting question, or want to know the answer. And that the teacher will in turn, or the parent will then ask the child a question, like, well, the best question to ask is, what do you think is the answer? Why do you think I cry when I'm feeling sad? Why do I smile when I'm feeling sad? What do you think? Why do you think people do that? I didn't ask that question when it happened with my relative, because I was thinking it was such a profound question. I didn't know how to answer it. But I should have said, what do you think? What do you think? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of that, and that's nourishing the curiosity, because then they have to think about it.
My brain's going in so many different directions, because there's like this shift is across so many different stakeholders, positions, organizations.
Yeah.
It is obviously overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming in my brain right now.
Yeah.
And you've broken it down in so many different studies, capacities.
Yeah.
I guess, like, if in a call to action for like an individual, what would be a first step for, like, okay, I'm hearing these concepts.
Yeah. No, it's I get asked the question. It's very obvious. Today, I always say to people, starting today, at the minute after you listen to this podcast, engage with whoever you're talking to in a curious fashion. Ask them when they ask a question, ask them questions. Hear what their questions are. We did a study of 700 undergraduates at NYU. They all had questions they wish people would ask them that don't ask them. And when you ask them why they want to be asked those questions, they said, to be seen as I see myself rather than to be stereotyped. Everybody has these questions. They're walking around wanting to be asked questions, and also wanting to ask questions, and they think that they're worried that it's rude. It's not rude to ask a question. So start with your curiosity. And curiosity, of course, I'm going to say this, is a form of care and cooperation. Because when you ask someone a question and you genuinely want to know the answer, like, what was your experience, or how do you think about this? And you really probe it, not just answering the question and then waiting for yourself to answer it, but actually, I spend 10 minutes trying to understand your experience. What we know in our research and what we know intuitively is you feel heard, you feel seen. And guess what happens when you feel heard and seen? You want to share it. You want to ask the person back about their experiences. And all of a sudden, then you have a pow connection. And then you're hooked. And I see that with my students. I've been teaching this with NYU students for a long time. And they say my classes changes their life because it's so easy. Just go do it today. Just start, rather than what I can share with you, what can I learn from you about your day, about what you think, about what you feel, about what you want, about anything, right? About your childhood, about the things you dream about. What can I learn about you? And not just waiting for you to share with them, but actually being curious, like a 4-year-old, like a 5-year-old, about the other person. And then I promise you, once you engage that real curiosity, they will be curious about you. But nobody's going to be curious about you if you're not curious about them. And so the idea is start with the daily practice of curiosity. And that is literally a daily practice of care and cooperation. Do you know what I mean by cooperation in that sense? Mm-hmm. You're cooperating on coming to know each other. And so it's very, very simple. And the reason why I know we can create this revolution, because we already are, because young people are sick of what we've been, right? People your age and younger are suffering. 17% of people under 30, according to a recent Harvard study, 17% report having a meaningful connection with another person. 1/7 under 30 report that's a crisis of connection. Mm-hmm. And so if you're having 17%, you're having people who are starving for meaningful connection. So I give them, in our work, I give them the permission to ask, right? Mark Brackett from the emotional intelligence world talks about permission to feel. I say permission to ask. And basically just do it. Just do it. You see someone you want to be friends with, just walk up to them and say, whatever you want to say to try to engage in a conversation with them. Ask them a question, get their opinion. It's not so complicated.
Yeah.
And I've seen, and the reason why I'm confident when I'm saying I've seen the transformation for decades now, just a simple daily practice. And then you have to start embedding it with at work, for example. Okay, so if we want to promote care, cooperation, and curiosity in our workplace so that our workers will stay at the job, they'll be more productive, they'll like each other more, they'll work more effectively together, right? So it's all outcomes. Then how are we going to do that? So maybe we need to ask, rather than the boss just telling us how to do it, maybe the boss needs to incorporate, well, how do you think we should do it? Based on your experience, how do you think we should solve this problem? Rather than saying, just do it this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that simple practice in leadership changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
When the employee gets asked, how do you think we should solve it? And doesn't just not listen and then move on, but actually thinks, oh, okay, well, that part of what you said seems really interesting. Maybe we should try that. All of a sudden you have an employee that wants to work on this team.
Yeah.
Right? And so to me, it's not making it so complicated because we were born that way. I mean, I'm asking for a society to tap into their 5-year-old selves. Not their 90-year-old selves, because they don't mostly have the 90-year-old self, but a 5-year-old self. I want to do a podcast at some point called How to Act Like a 5-Year-Old.
I love that.
You know what I mean? No, really.
Yeah.
And we could do it together. But I'm just saying, just that simple thing of tap into your 5-year-old sense of wonder at each other, at the world, at what's around you. And you can do it like that, because I've seen my students do it like that.
Yeah. And I think the additional realization that the people around you are yearning for the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I say that to boys and young men all the time, because they always will say things like, I remember.
Like, I want to, but I'm scared. Because,
I know.
Yeah.
And they always say that to me. And every single time, I have a great story to tell you, actually. So I'm in a classroom, 22 boys. They're all about 12, 13. It's a 7th grade classroom. And they read a little bit of Deep Secrets. And one of the boys, I tell this story a lot, but I'll tell it for your podcast too. One of the boys, they read the I miss him, I love him so much quote from Deep Secrets. And the boys start to laugh. And one of the boys says, the dude sounds gay. And I said, I don't look at sexuality, but let me tell you something. They're 12 years old. I said, 80% of teenage boys sound like that at some point during adolescence. And it's totally silent. And the 12-year-old goes, for real? And I said, oh yeah, that's what teenage boys sound like. And you know what happened? It makes me emotional to tell a story. They all started sharing their feelings of love for their friends, or the 2 boys talked about breaking up in the classroom. How you hurt my feelings, that's why I didn't want to be your friend anymore. So it went from that's so gay to talking about their own friendships, and all I did was normalize it. I just said it's normal. That's what boys want. That's what everybody wants. You're not a weirdo for wanting that. It's just normal. And so I oftentimes tell parents when they ask me what they can do, I said normalize that boys are as equally hard and soft as girls, or as non-gender conforming. It's not a gender identity. It's a human capacity and need.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the biggest message. It's not, I'm going to repeat it because we're not getting that. It is not a gender identity. It's not about being masculine or feminine. It's about being human and valuing thinking and feeling, self and other, autonomy and connectedness, stoicism and vulnerability. I mean, I could do the millions of contrasts, valuing them equally, right? And recognizing oftentimes, neuroscience now, that thinking and feeling are never split. When you're thinking, you're feeling. When you're feeling, you're thinking. You can't split thinking and feeling. And so, to me, the revolution has already started, first of all, because you're getting you're getting a podcast that's interviewing me, right? So that's already started. You get the Oscar-winning film, Oscar-nominated film Close. I mean, it's already in the culture now. We're already talking a different language. We're talking about men's friendships now. We never talked about men's friendships. We're talking about the emotional life of boys and men. We've never talked about that, right? So it's already changing. We're already changing the culture. And who's driving it? People under 30. I mean, they're insisting on it, right? And so to me, the revolution has already started. We're already seeing lots of evidence of it. The attention my work gets, the fact I get interviewed all the time, means we're already getting there, right? And we just have to be consistent with what we're doing and not turn it into a battle between men and women or between Republicans and Democrats. We can't do that. Because once we make it a battle between men and women, which is what we're doing now, or between Republicans and Democrats, once we make it, that's the problem, I always say to my students, it sounds dramatic, we sort of throw acid in our eyes because we get blinded to actually what's really happening, which is that we're not valuing our full humanity.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we just need to just value it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yep.
see that that's the solution to our mental health problems, our loneliness, our suicides, our violence, right? Drug abuse, eating disorders, all the craziness that the self-harm and other harm we do is rooted in that we are raising our children to go against their nature. And for many children, they grow up to be people who struggle.
Mm.
And so stop it.
Yeah.
Right? Just stop it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a stronger double underline
Yeah.
than that.
Just stop it. No, and really, that's part of the spirit of Rebels. Like, just stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're killing ourselves. We are literally killing ourselves. So stop it. It's not natural to kill ourselves and to kill each other. That is not a natural thing in a social species like we are.
Yeah.
It is not natural. So stop actually creating the conditions that make us kill each other. And I'm not being stupid about institutional change, institutional racism, institutional sexism, et cetera. I'm not saying that. I am saying that won't happen, though, if you don't start with the basics, that we're all equally human. There's no humans that are more human than others, and that our hard and soft skills are equally important. Those two fundamental things. We're all equally human, and our hard and soft skills are equally important. We don't flip the hierarchy and put soft on top or hard on top. They're all equally important, right? We don't flip the hierarchy with humans either and put those who have been historically on the bottom on top and those who have been historically on the top on the bottom. That's not going to solve the problem, right? Might feel good at the moment, but it's not going to solve the problem. So once we understand that, you can't flip the hierarchy. You have to disrupt the whole thing. And kids are doing that every day of their lives, right? Revealing their hard and soft sides, valuing their friends equally. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Then, you have an entirely different culture.
Yeah. It's getting back to like stopping at the symptoms of what has been transpiring for hundreds of years.
Yeah. And basically understanding that we have to think of primary prevention, not just tertiary prevention. And tertiary, for those of you who don't know, for your listeners who don't know, is basically just treating the symptoms. And the idea is we have to get out of this just treating the symptoms. We have to say, we have a loneliness crisis, we have a mental health crisis. Why do we have a loneliness crisis?
Yeah.
Why do we have a mental health crisis? And boys and young men tell us why. Literally, in their narratives, in their manifestos, they tell us directly why. And they've been saying that for almost a century in different forms. And we're just not hearing it.
Yeah.
And so to me, my passion is listen to what young people teach us, and we'll be able to move even faster in our cultural change, because we are already changing, but we'll be able to move faster. And weirdly enough, I think the Trump era, which is so particularly antisocial, will help us. I want your listeners to understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying Trump's forces are positive in any way, because it's destroying lots of families at this point. What I'm saying is, when we get to the bottom, like an alcoholic, when you get to the bottom of the barrel, it's helpful you see your problem more, right? And so then the push to change becomes more intense.
Yeah.
Don't
I said what you're saying, and it's making me think of like the counterfactual of like, okay, imagine if we did achieve the world you're describing, where every single boy and every single person had this like robust, deeply connected group of friends, support systems. Like, imagine that person being unhealthy or unhappy, and they wouldn't.
Yeah, no, exactly. They just wouldn't be. And I'm not saying, because I'm not, I don't necessarily believe in utopia. So there's always going to be variation.
Totally.
But I'm just saying they would certainly decline.
Yeah.
Our rates of mental health and that are soaring, and our suicides that are soaring, they're off the charts. Our mass, I want to remind your listeners, mass violence, mass shooters, there was approximately in 2000, I think it was 2004, there was like 8 a year. Now there is more than 1 a day. In 20 years, we have gone from 80, and then in the 90s, it would be like 3 a year, right? Now it's more than once a day. We have an example of mass shootings, which is 4 or more people are shot in one, or killed in one setting. So
Yeah, the engine lights are on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so ultimately, it will definitely diminish. Will it disappear? Of course not. We're always going to have, unfortunately, we're always going to have abuse because we're partly also, we have a capacity to be terrible to each other
Yeah.
and given certain contexts, to be terrible with each other and to raise children that are really deeply suffering.
Yeah.
From,
And there's the theory to pursue, and then the in practice
yeah,
for implementation will
yeah,
always be
yeah,
slower.
exactly.
So,
We'll always be slower, and we'll always have mental health problems. We'll always have social health problems. We'll always have violence problems. But we could certainly diminish them if we nourish our social nature, right? And it's just so easy to do. And yeah, and again, young people are going to be the loudest about it. They're always the loudest.
yeah.
And no, but we just need to actually start listening rather than just saying stop being a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that was an amazing hour. I want to be mindful of your time and check in. If there's another message we hadn't covered or where people can find you?
Yeah. So I would say you can always find, I mean, I'm on Instagram and I'm on, LinkedIn, and you can always follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn most of all, actually. But also if you have questions, I would say you can put in, actually, I don't think I want to give my Gmail. So I would just say LinkedIn is the best way.
We can link that.
And I have lots of websites. So there's lots to get access. And then I think in those websites there are email, ways to contact me and my staff.
Amazing.
So it'd be great. And I would say I think I've said it, what I want to say, but I just want to underscore that to say we need to change our culture sounds big, but we change our culture all the time. And I want to remind people we went from, Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden and then back to Trump. I mean, massive cultural shifts. We had gay marriage within 10 years. It was a shock for my generation to have it happen so fast. It may disappear. I mean, but the idea is we're changing our culture all the time. We're all the time changing our culture. It's not a big ask. And we're already changing it in a positive way driven by young people doing it. So it's just not a big ask. We're actually very flexible human beings. We respond to our environment. And when there's enough support for care, cooperation, and curiosity, and you change the technology so you can foster it, which is what we're doing with our center, you're just going to see a very different culture. You just will.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not the ask I'm asking our world is not a big ask. Actually, I'm not asking it. It's young people asking it, right? They're asking us, they're saying this is the problem. This is the solution. Won't you help us get where we all want to go? And it's just a matter of actually listening. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, it's great. It's really fun.
That's
Super
a wrap.
fun. Yeah,
We did
thank
it.
you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I love the final message, breaking it down of because as you're talking, I'm feeling, holy moly, this is so big. But then you're totally right.
I know.
We
do it all the time.
If you think about the change for the past even 1 year.
No, exactly.
It's so rapid.
I mean, it's so rapid. I mean, think about what you changed. I mean, we are changing all the time. And especially if you go literally, it's just stunning to me. Bush, Obama, Trump, right? Obama, Trump was shocking.
Yeah.
And then Trump, Biden, and then Biden, Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump is a very different Trump than he was before. And then think about all the cultural change. And then the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement.
Yeah. The pace is unbelievable.
I mean, unbelievable. The pace is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And even with the technology, social media, Facebook was only 2004. That's sort of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're completely transformed as a society.
Yeah.
And that's, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've completely transformed as a society. So the idea is we can change in any way we want.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I've been on this friendship thing for a long time. And now I'm sort of the popular kid on the block. And that's also a relatively short change, that we are starting to value our friendships. We are starting to understand that everybody needs friendships.
Yep.
Well, do you know something about, I have to get the statistic that I'm glad I'm not on air because I will get the sticks wrong. But it's like something like 40% of people under 50 or 55 have never been married.
Mm.
It's never been like that in the history of the United States. Never.
Yeah.
40% have never been married under 55.
Yeah. That's new.
I know. That's new. It's super new.
Yeah.
Right? We're not getting married.
Mm-hmm.
We're not having children.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, we're not getting married.
Not even dating either.
Yeah, we're not dating. I mean, I know that from my kids. You're close to my kids' generation. They're not dating.
Yeah.
Not getting married. I think there's more and more division between men and women, quite frankly. And so I watch my daughter only have women friends, and my son only has male friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with slight variation.
Right.
But basically, it's division. When I was a kid, it was boys and girls in my group. I mean, we were all having sleepovers together. I mean, basically, it was just all that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're changing, and I think we don't recognize the change. So then we think when someone says, "Well, we could create positive change," they're like, "That sounds too hard."
Yeah,
and it's
it
like,
feels
no,
big. Yeah,
yeah, it feels big, and it's not big. It's not big.
Yeah, it was especially for me too. It's a hopeful way. Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into the void, but it's hopeful for me to hear as well.
Yeah. I mean, even this podcast, I mean, I always say to the podcaster, because I oftentimes get this question, I'm like, your podcast would not have existed 10 years ago.
Totally, yeah.
I mean, never. No one would have listened to your podcast.
Yep.
You would have never even thought about your podcast 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that there's all these podcasts is huge.
Yeah.
We're having real conversations. Podcasts have produced real conversations. Think about the old days. You just had articles, who got into the Atlantic Monthly?
Yeah.
Who got into the New York Times. It's impossible to get into those magazines. So those forums. So those are the only conversations we had. The op-eds in our newspapers, or the person who got into the Rolling Stone article.
Yep.
Think about that. That's the only voices we basically got to hear.
Yep.
And now we get to hear everyday voices.
I'm so glad you came on.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying we have to, just like we have to recognize curiosity, care, and cooperation, we've got to recognize the change that we're seeing, right? I mean, that we are changing. We are definitely changing for the good.
Yep.
We're engaging in these conversations. Amazing, right?
Yep. Now you got me all fired up.
Yeah.